Hello everyone, I'm bringing a video today looking at a series of magazine pouches, and these are East German magazine pouches designed for use with the MPiK series of assault rifles. So the MPiK being an East German version of the AK-47, the MPiKM being an East German version of the AKM, and so on. The family grew from there. So these are designed to take the 30 round AK magazine basically, and that's what we're looking at in this video, are magazine pouches specifically designed for use with that weapon series. We won't be looking at anything earlier than that. Obviously there were pouches for use with the PPSH and various other weapons prior to the introduction of the MPiK. So this will take us right the way through from the 1960s to the end of East Germany basically. It's not comprehensive. I'm sure there are various other design details and variations which will not be covered in this video, but nevertheless hopefully it will be of interest and it will show something of a timeline of development for these pouches as well. So without further ado, we'll get into the main part of the video and have a look at these pouches in some detail. So we'll start off with a bit of an overview of what we're going to talk about in this video, and in the top left we have an early flak and tarn ammunition pouch, magazine pouch, and then we have a series of Stricktarn magazine pouches, and we'll talk about these in some detail now. Obviously we're going to look at all of these individually, but I wanted to show you at the start here a sort of side-by-side comparison of these. We have the 6 pouches here that we're going to look at in a bit more detail now. So the first pouch we're going to look at here is in the earlier East German camouflage pattern, flak and tarn, or Blumentarn, colloquially of course, flower camouflage, for obvious reasons. The sort of bright colours, the bright splotches look a bit like flowers, flower petals. This is actually my preferred East German camouflage, I would say. I wish they'd persevered with it during the 1960s and into the early 1970s. A lot of equipment and uniform was made in this pattern. Then in 1965 you have parallel production in Stricktarn, and then of course Stricktarn would take over entirely in the 1970s. You see the occasional item of flak and tarn equipment in use into the later 1970s. Certainly the gas mask bags I've seen turn up around that time, and then you see elements such as these magazine pouches sort of passed off to the Kampfgruppe and Arbeiterklasse and so forth. So you see a use of this past into the later 1970s, but only in limited circumstances. It was replaced with Stricktarn in production by that point. So looking at this design, this is actually really intended as a one side of 2 pouches. So there was a 2-cell version of this curved the opposite way that was supposed to be worn on the other side. I don't have an example of one of those yet. I'm hopefully going to be rectifying that soon, so we may well revisit this set of pouches at some point in the future. This example is in particularly nice condition. You can see it really shows off the camouflage print very effectively. The sort of mid-grey background with the russet colour here, the sort of turquoisey, dark turquoisey green, and then this lighter green as well. It's really quite a pleasant camouflage pattern. I like it a lot, just visually speaking. I think it's very nice. The colours would vary somewhat throughout production over the years, and certainly there are many good examples out there of the clothing manufactured in this that show just how varied the colour could be and how different the contrast could be in the colours. So this pouch is very simple. You have a closure here formed from 2 mushroom studs. You can see there with buttonholes on the flap. It's 3 cells, as you can see from the stitching here, and obviously it's curved to allow for the curved magazines of the MPiKM. If we open this up here, you can see the internal details. You can see the reinforcement. This one is a little bit stiff, buttonhole's a bit tight, but it will come off. There we go. Try and be relatively delicate with these. You can see the reinforcing stitched around the studs there. You can see, if I get the light in here, you can see that they're actually attached within the inner lining of this. You can see the point of wear there, where things have been in and out and they've worn a little bit on the lining material there. This thicker grey sort of webbing, cotton webbing, I think it's cotton. This sort of lining material is used in all the pouches, or very similar. It does get modified a little bit over the years. But you can see, although it's simple construction, it's very well made. You have riveted reinforcement here at the top, as you can see there, and at the rear. You can see that the inside of the rivets there for where the internal dividers attach into this. So you've got rivets as well as stitching there to reinforce this. There's no drainage or anything at the bottom, as you can see, and you can see how thin this is, so just designed to take 1 magazine in each pocket. And at the back here you can see the outside of those rivets at each corner here, where the internal dividers are stitched into place, and then also reinforcing where this ring at the top attaches. This of course would take the hooks on the earlier suspenders, so it would be directly supported by the suspenders. And these appear in the 1960s with the introduction of the MPiK. So as I say, carried one on each side, so you'd have 3 magazines on one side and then 2 on the other. And you can see we've got rivets reinforcing the belt loops here. And you can see the sort of angle this would have sat on the belt. So it doesn't sit like this, the belt directly across, it sits at something of an angle, so the curve is taken away from the hips is the idea. So the centre of the belt would be here, the other pouch on the other side curving the other way, so that the ammunition, the magazines inside curve away from the hips. Now in actuality it's very common to see these worn singly. The 2 round or the 3 round were often worn or carried on the web equipment singly, individually. But as I say, they are designed, initially at least, to be carried as a pair, which is different to sort of Soviet practice where the ammunition is carried on one hip. The East German equipment originally it was made with the intention of a pouch on each side. Now this design is also made in Stricktarn. There are examples of these made in Stricktarn as well as a variation, so there's a lot of experimenting going on in the 1960s, and that's where you see some of the major variations. And then we'll move on to look at something a bit more familiar now, probably more familiar in terms of East German magazine pouches. Another 1960s pouch, but a slightly later example from the later 1960s, made in Stricktarn. That's what we're going to have a look at now. So here we have the next magazine pouch, and as you can see this is made in Stricktarn. And this is a late 1960s, or mid to late 1960s magazine pouch. It is a 4-cell pouch, but carried with 2 stacks, so the magazines are stacked 2 together. And the idea of this is you carry one of these pouches on the right hip, curving away from the hip when carried, and the magazines would all be carried in here, and then the bayonet would be on the left, and obviously the gas mask bag as well. So what marks this out as an earlier pouch, as you'll see, this design was carried forward and basically simplified and produced for many, many years. We have the rivets here securing the quick release tabs at the front. That's a mark of an earlier example of one of these. And on the back here we have riveted reinforcement to these various features. So the belt loops have riveted reinforcement. We still have a loop to support this using the suspenders, and you have a rivet securing that there as well, and the rivet in the centre for the internal dividers. We'll open this up and have a look inside and get these quick release tabs. I do find with these that the metal tabs, because they're stiff and the strap is soft, they do often have a tendency to catch in the metal loops, and that's a little bit annoying. But nevertheless, I say quite well manufactured, quite a high quality for this, and the fixtures and fittings and so forth do work quite well other than that small detail. You can see the back of the rivets here using the same hollow rivets. We have one there for the central divider as well. You now have these metal loops obviously to take to go through the slots on the closure flap, and these obviously allow the quick release tabs to be run through. You have that grey webbing lining material I mentioned again in this, as you can see, and you can see we have the 4 cells in there for 4 magazines in total. The rivet for the ring on the back there for supporting this with the suspenders, and obviously riveted reinforcement in the centre there, as you can see, for the internal dividers. We also have rivets on each side where the internal dividers attach, and we open this up here, you can see the outside of those. Again, no drainage in the bottom. This has seen some use. You can see there's a little bit of dirt on it from where it's been used, but it's otherwise in very, very nice condition. So this would be a late 1960s and used into the 1970s Stricktarn ammunition pouch. The design was further simplified, and the next example we're going to have a look at is the first sort of version, the first version of the simplification, I guess you could say. I'll just close this up. So we'll move on to have a look at the next one of these now. So the next magazine pouch we have here is probably, from this side at least, the most familiar you'll see out there. These were produced, slightly modified again, right the way through, I believe, into the 1980s, when modifications were made to the design again. But this particular example from this angle looks like those you'd see right the way through from the 1970s into the 1980s, still in use. The quick release tabs at the front have lost the rivets here and here, as you can see. If we open this up, we do still have some rivets, as you can see, and we'll see more detail of that in a minute. You don't have them for the internal dividers anymore, and interestingly in this example the rear internal divider has been cut out, it's been removed, probably to allow you to carry something a bit more bulky in the back there. It's been cut down to, well, you can see about 5-6 centimetres at the bottom is left, but most of it's been cut out of there. So no rivets on the side, so the internal dividers have no rivets at all. But on the back, the load-bearing components, the belt loops, and we still have the ring at the top, they're all reinforced with rivets, as you can see. Now made of a nylon webbing, the webbing on the back, as you can see there. Obviously this ring here still allows you to carry this directly hooked onto the suspenders. So just a simplification of the design, less rivets used, but otherwise the design is basically as we saw before. So this is the first simplification. Still have that support point on the back, still have rivets on the belt loops, but it has been simplified by the removal of rivets from the rest of the design, as you can see. The next pouch we're going to look at here is the final simplification of that curved magazine pouch. You can see it still has the curve to it to fit the magazines. And as far as I'm aware, these were produced during the 1970s and into the 1980s. And they are probably the most common to find. I wish I had one in better condition than this. This is really beaten up. I've actually had to do some stitching to stitch the side seam back together again, and these are really heavily faded. It would be nice to pick up an example of one of these in pretty much unissued condition. That would be nice to find, but I don't have one as yet. But this serves the purpose for now. I'm sure I'll find one around and about. They did make a large number of these and they're still fairly readily available out there. Just looking for one in particularly nice condition, really. So at the front here, it basically looks identical to the one we just looked at. So you've got the quick release tabs here with no rivets, as you can see. And then on the inside, there are no rivets at all. As you can see, we don't have any rivets. You still have that grey lining material, as you can see. You have the intact dividers on the inside here. No rivets around the side. Nothing reinforcing the internal dividers, as you can see. And then when we look at the back, we can see, as well as not having that upper ring to help support this using the suspenders, the belt loops are now straight on the back, so this hangs straight down on the belt, as you can see. And because of that, it hangs lower on the belt, it hangs straight down on the belt. You don't need the loop to support this directly using the suspenders, really. It will quite happily just sit on the belt. Generally with the loop on the later pattern of suspenders looped through the middle and hooked in, so that this is sort of directly supported with a suspender coming down between the two belt loops on the back. As you can see, no riveting here to reinforce them, as we've already mentioned. You can see the stitching here for the central divider there. No rivets once again. So a further simplification to the design. As I say, probably one of the most common types of ammunition pouches you'll find out there. And hopefully I'll find one of these at some point in the future in better condition than this one. But this serves the purpose for the moment, and as I say, I'm just being careful with it because obviously the stitching appears to be quite delicate through use. But it is nice to have an example that's been used quite heavily, as we have here as well. It would just be nice to have a cleaner example to add to the collection, as well as having this one. The next pouch to have a look at here takes the fact that the pouch hangs straight on the belt a step further, and the pouch is just made as a straight boxy pouch, as you can see here. Obviously we've not had any rivets reintroduced, but you still have the two quick release tabs there, as you can see. If we open this up, you see you have the divider in there for your 4 magazines, and this is quite voluminous compared to the others. Obviously curved magazines in a straight pouch, it needs to be a little bit more voluminous, but it does simplify manufacture, I would imagine, just making a square ammunition pouch rather than trying to make this in a shaped manner to fit the curved magazines. If we turn this over here, you can see very simply on the back we have the 2 straight belt loops here made of that grey nylon material, in common with a lot of other East German equipment. You can see the stitching there for the central divider and so forth. So that's the penultimate pouch we're going to have a look at. We have one more to look at before we're done with the video. This is the final pouch we're going to have a look at, and this is a modification of the design we've just looked at. You actually have an additional pouch on the side here, which I believe is designed to carry a cleaning kit, and this is primarily intended for use with the MPi-AK-74, the N, and there was another version of that as well. These were basically the East German version of the AK-74, and as I say, you have this additional pouch here, I believe for carrying the cleaning kit for that rifle. So this is otherwise very similar, straight, boxy ammunition pouch, magazine pouch, as you can see here. 2 belt loops on the back there, again made of the nylon, so this hangs straight on the belt, as you can see. This is in quite nice condition, a little bit of wear to it, but the straps and everything are still sort of in their original unfaded grey colour, which is quite nice. We open this up here, look inside. There is actually a stamp in this one, which is, turn that over there, it's not particularly clear, but you can see that there. I'll perhaps put a little note in the bottom of the video here. That would be the third quarter of Y, which is a late, forget the year of that off the top of my head, but I'll put that down below. It would be the third quarter of whatever year Y represents. It's quite a late year in the date code system in East Germany. You can see the flap is lined with that grey material in this instance, and you have that throughout inside as well. And then this compartment at the front here additionally has a strap and press stud there, with two female press studs on the strap in order to secure that tightly or loosely, depending on what you were carrying in that compartment. Closing the main flap, have a look at this little side pocket as well. Have a look here. And you can see here, this side pocket is simply just made of the same strict arm material as the rest of the pouch, just stitched on the side there. You have this waterproofing sort of plastic lining to this, which is obviously similar to that you would see with the Sturmpack and so forth. So you can see in there the back of the metal loops, the staple. Hopefully you can see that in there for the quick release. So just a simple little added on pouch on the side of this for carrying the cleaning kit. So put that, close that up as well. And that's the last pouch we're going to have a look at here. As I say, not entirely comprehensive. We've talked about some variations there which aren't shown in the video, but hopefully it's been good looking at these. And obviously I'll probably be making future videos talking a little bit more about this in more detail, looking at perhaps the evolution of East German load bearing equipment, the different suspenders and so forth. So hopefully you found it interesting looking at this. As said at the start, this is not comprehensive by any means, I'm sure, but nevertheless we'll give you something of a timeline of development for these pouches. Hopefully it's been interesting looking at them, and hopefully it's filled in some blanks in people's knowledge. And from my point of view, if anyone can provide further information, that would be great, because it fills in blanks in my knowledge as well. Anything regarding more precise dates as to when these were introduced and so forth, always very much appreciated. Anyone who comments down below with further information, thank you very much in advance. If you have found this interesting and you'd like to see future videos looking at more East German kit and the other topics covered on the channel, please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the notification button down below. That of course alerts you when I upload future videos. That's everything for this video, so until next time, bye for now.